Tabari and Ishaq. When Muhammad received word of them, and what they had determined to do, he laid out a trench to protect Medina. He encouraged the Muslims to dig it, with promises of a heavenly reward. The person who advised him about the trench was Salman. He said, "In Persia, whenever we were surrounded, we would dig a trench to protect ourselves. Certain men of the hypocrites slacked off and disobeyed the messenger. They pretended to be too weak to work, slipping away to their families without the knowledge or permission of the Prophet."
As we learned in the 33rd Surah, Muhammad considered Muslims to be his personal property. Composing scripture in Baghdad 300 years after the fact, the sages attributed these words to their prophet.
Tabari and Ishaq. I have heard some stories about the digging of the trench, in which there is an example of Allah justifying his apostle and confirming his prophetic office. For example, Muslims spat on a rock, sprinkled water on it, and crumbled it. Then the apostle said, "I struck the first blow, and what you saw flash out was that Iraq and Persia would see dogs' teeth. Gabriel informed me that my nation would be victorious over them. Then I struck my second blow, and what flashed out was for the pale men in the land of the Byzantines to be bitten by the dog's teeth. Gabriel informed me that my nation would be victorious over them. Then I struck my third blow, and Gabriel told me that my nation would be victorious over Yemen. Rejoice, victory shall come. Praise be to Allah. He has promised us victory after tribulation," and this increased the Muslims' faith and submission.
With divine approval to make war, we read in Tabari, Volume 8, page 13.
These cities were conquered in the time of Umar, Uthman, and others. Muslims used to say, "Conquer for yourselves whatever seems good to you, for by Allah you have conquered no city but that Muhammad was given its keys beforehand."
So back in the pit we read,
Tabari. When Allah's apostle finished the trench, the Quraysh came and encamped near streams with 10,000 men from many tribes. The messenger went out with 3,000 Muslims. The enemy of Allah, Huyayy bin Akhtab, came to Kab bin Asad, who had formed a treaty with the Qurayza,
the only remaining Jewish settlement in Yathrib.
Kab made a truce with Muhammad on behalf of his people. When Kab heard Huyayy, he shut the door in his face. Huyayy asked to be allowed in, but Kab refused. "Woe to you, Huyayy," answered Kab. "You are a man who brings bad luck. I have made a treaty with Muhammad and will not break the pact. I have seen nothing but faithfulness and truth on his part."
It's hard to imagine less believable dialogue. The Qurayza, after all, had seen the Qanuqa and Nadir settlements besieged by Muhammad. They had witnessed his deceit, his violence, his thievery, and his barbarism.
Tabari. Kab said, "Leave me alone to deal with Muhammad," but Huyayy kept wheedling and twisting until Kab yielded. Huyayy promised, "If the Quraysh and Ghatatfan retreat without having killed Muhammad, I will enter your fortress, so that whatever happens to you shall happen to me." So Kab broke his treaty and renounced the bond.
The Muslims, who can't keep their own story straight, cannot be believed when it comes to private conversations between opposing parties.
Tabari. When the news reached Muhammad, he sent Saad, chief of the Aus, to Kab. "If it is true, speak to me in words that we can understand, but that will be unintelligible to others." So he went out and found them engaged in the worst of what had been reported. They slandered the messenger and said, "There is no treaty between us." Saad reviled them, and they reviled him. Saad was a man with a sharp temper. He told the Jews, "Stop reviling him, for the disagreement between us is too serious for an exchange of taunts."
Since Saad was easily the most enraged anti-Semite in Medina, the Jews would never have granted him an audience. And, once given, they would never have taunted him, proclaiming their vulnerability. So why did the Islamic sages go to the trouble of writing such irrational dialogue? Might Muhammad have already turned on the Qurayza and needed an excuse to justify his rage? Stay tuned. Returning to the siege of the Quraysh, we find more evidence that Islam was all about money.
Tabari and Ishaq. Soon the trial became great for the Muslims, and fear intensified. Their foe came at them from above and below, so that the believers were beset with fear. The hypocrisy of the hypocrites became evident. One said, Muhammad was promising us that we should eat up the treasures of Chrysos, the Persians, and Caesar, the Byzantines, and now none of us can even go out to relieve himself.
We were told way back in Mecca that Mohammed lured Muslims into Islam by promising them that they would steal the treasures of the Persians and Byzantines by conquest. It must have been an effective ploy, because even now the Medina Muslims were repeating it. Unfortunately for the victims of Islamic terror, the Persian trench prevailed. The merchants of Mecca were unable to traverse the crude defense.
Tabari. The Muslims and the polytheists stayed in their positions for 20 nights with no fighting, except for the shooting of arrows and the siege. When the trial became great for the people, the messenger sent for the leaders of the Ghatatfan.
They were the Meccan comrades.
He offered them a third of the date harvest of Medina on a condition that they leave.
The bribe is interesting, as the dates being offered didn't belong to Muhammad.
The truce between the sides progressed to the point of drawing up a written document, but there was no witnessing or firm determination to make peace. It was only a matter of maneuvering.
This prophet was a shifty fellow. But what I don't get is Muslims, since Muhammad was obviously willing to deceive, to cheat, bribe, rape, kidnap, or kill anyone he met. Why did they trust him with their soul? The date farmers, having been corrupted by Islam, said,
Ishaq, now that Allah has conferred Islam upon us and made us famous, shall we give them our property? By Allah, we will offer them only the sword until Allah judges between us. As you wish, said Allah's messenger. Tabari. The Quraysh rode out on their horses and said, Get ready for warfare. Today you shall know the real horsemen. They advanced toward the trench,
which they had been staring at for a month,
and halted by it. When they saw it, they said, By Allah, this is a stratagem that the Arabs have never employed.
How is it possible that these men could have been so dense that they simply didn't go to one of the many piles of dirt that had been taken out of the trench and push it back in? They didn't, so we're told Ali, the darling of the Shiites in Baghdad, challenged Amr to a duel.
Tabari and Ishaq. I summon you to Allah, to his messenger, and to Islam. Amr replied, I have no use for these. So Ali said, Then I summon you to fight. Amr replied, Why, son of my brother? By Allah, I don't want to kill you. Ali shouted, But I, by Allah, want to kill you.
Islam is so poisonous, it makes men actually want to kill their family members.
Amr jumped from his horse and advanced toward Ali. The two fought until Ali killed Amr. He shouted, Allahu Akbar. Ishaq. As he returned to the apostle smiling with joy
for having killed his uncle,
Jumar asked if he had stripped Amr of his armor. No, Ali answered. I saw his private parts and was ashamed. Tabari. Nafal plunged into the trench and became trapped in it. The Muslims pelted him with stones. He said, Arabs, a slaying is better than this. So Ali went down and killed him. The Muslims took his corpse. They asked the messenger to sell them his body. The prophet said, We have no need for his body or its price. Do with it as you like.
Just then our favorite anti-Semite entered the fray.
Tabari. His mother said, Hurry up, son, you are late. Aisha replied, I wish Saad's coat of mail were ampler. I fear for him. Ishaq. Saad was hit by an Arab arrow, and the median vein of his arm was cut, and he said, Allah, make your face sweat in the hell fire. Grant me martyrdom, and do not let me die until I see my desire done to the Qurayza.
This is an odd request, even for an embittered racist. The arrow that had pierced him was from an Arab, not a Jew.